So I've had this SL for getting on for 2 years now, nearly. Probably 2 years this March. And I thought it was about time I did a video about it. It's featured in another one where I talked about what Mercedes SL is the right one to buy, what their prices are, whether there's any kind of investment potential in any of them. And so I thought it was about time I did a video on this particular one. This is an R230. It's a 2006 Mercedes SL350, so that's the V6, and I'll come back to the different engine choices in a moment. So I want to do this video as a kind of a buying guide to the R230, and also explain why I bought this particular one, because I'm really pleased with this one. I think it's a bit of a gem, but you know, I'm kind of slightly biased maybe because it is my car, but I think this is the sweet spot of the R230. And as I said, I'll go through all the different options and choices, and I'll tell you why this particular one was the one I went for. So the R230 was built between 2001 and 2011, but it went through 2 facelifts during that life. So the first was in 2006, and the second was in 2008. Now visually, there's not a lot of difference between the first and the second iterations, but the third completely did away with the quad headlamps. So one of the things I'm going to do for this video is almost kind of ignore that, because if you want to have an R230 SL which is more modern looking and much more like the current SL, say current, there's about to be another one brought out very shortly, but if you want to have a modern SL, a modern looking SL, then go for the one that's 2008 onwards, that's got the squared headlamps. But for the purposes of this video here on in, I'll kind of ignore that particular model. So we'll focus on the first 2 iterations. And as I said, there's not a lot of difference visually. The best way to tell the difference is actually from the front, where if you look below the bumper level and around the grille, there's a lot of differences in styling. Particularly if you can spot the fog lamps underneath the bumper, and if they have a chrome ring around them, that is the 2006 facelift. So the differences weren't just styling. The first iteration carried on a lot of the drivetrains from the R129, the preceding model. And what happened in 2006 was they revised that, and you got different engines, different gearboxes. So the 3.5 litre V6 in the first iteration was actually 3.7 litres, and there was a 5 litre V8. There's also a 5.5 litre V12. So now the V12s are quite rare. If you're looking for something V12, by all means go for it. So I'm going to focus on the 3.5 litre V6 and the 5 litre or thereabouts V8. So the first iteration, the 3.7 litre V6 did 245 PS, the 5 litre V8 did 306 PS, and both of those were mated to a 5-speed 5G-tronic gearbox. So that gearbox was kind of an automated gearbox of Mercedes design. They still have the same kind of concept in their cars now, just that the number has gone up. So actually in 2006, that was one of the changes that happened during the facelift, was it became 7G-tronic with, no surprises, 7-speed gearbox. One of the things that gearbox does is kind of some intelligence to it. I mean, it won't start, you will never pull away in first gear unless you're in sport mode. So it doesn't need to use those gears if it doesn't want to. And when it's changing up and down, it will happily skip gears if it thinks that's the right thing to do. Now, the R230 was the first Mercedes-Benz SL with a metal folding roof. Prior to that, you had a separate roof, which 2 of you had to lift off and put back on again. And an awful lot of the time, they spent sort of stored in the corner of a garage somewhere. So the metal folding roof was quite a novelty, and insanely practical, because you get the best of both worlds. If you want a coupe like I've got now, it's sort of the roof is up. It feels just like a hardtop. There's no real difference at all. If you want to enjoy the sunshine, then between 16 and 20 seconds later, after having flicked a switch or pulled a switch, then you've got an open topper convertible. So it is, as I said, the best of both worlds with that roof. But also, the R230 introduced a whole lot of electronic wizardry, some of which worked well, some of which didn't work so well. So one of the things, for example, was a kind of the the throttle and brakes are kind of drive-by-wire, so there's no direct linkage. And the other thing which was an option on the V6s after the facelift, but was standard or typically standard on the V8s and above, was ABC, active body control, which is kind of an air suspension system set up to help manage the bumps, give you a smoother ride, be able to firm up if you want to go sort of fast in sport. And so yeah, it was quite a thing. Now, one of the issues is with the R230 is ABC, and I'd like to say if it goes wrong, but typically it will be when it goes wrong, it's quite costly to fix. So I've heard numbers around £1,000 a corner if and when it goes wrong. So, you know, let's hope it doesn't go wrong on all four corners, because you could potentially wipe out the value of some of those earlier cars. So as well as ABC issues, which there are, which persisted throughout the R230 life, there are also other issues with the first generation. Now, one of those was that the roof seals around the boot leaks, and so sometimes you could have a lot of water suddenly in the boot, which is never very good. Again, in the earlier models, rust in the rear arches, potentially related to the water ingress. But there are a number of kind of issues that first generation had. There's an issue with the auxiliary battery, so it has two batteries, one in the front, which does the starter and what have you, and the other one which is in the boot, which runs all of the auxiliary gear, all the accessories like the stereo and the like. And if you're not using the car, that can drain quite quickly because it's running the clock and such like. So if you've got a smart charger, it's worth hooking one up on a sort of semi-permanent basis. So for example, I've not driven this car for maybe 3 weeks or so, and when I started it up this morning, it was telling me the auxiliary battery was low. And what it basically means is you just have to kind of run the engine for a few minutes, and then it gets enough charge in that battery to carry on. And most of those issues, as I said, the ABC persisted, and the auxiliary battery is obviously an ongoing issue, but they're not big problems for the second generation. So from facelift onwards, from 2006 onwards, it dealt with some of those issues. The other big issue that it dealt with was the engine. So even though the V6, for example, had 245 PS, it was still a little bit low, felt a little bit underpowered. So when they went to the second generation, the 2006 facelift, you got a 3.5 litre engine, which is 350 anyway, so kind of same nomenclature, but it's actually slightly smaller engine, slightly smaller capacity, but they'd increased the output to 272 PS. The V8 went from 306 to 388 PS, so that's quite a staggering uplift. They'd actually managed to get another half litre out of the engine, so it's a 5.5 litre engine, but a big increase in power. I guess those are the big choices you've got with the R230. Do you want a modern look? If so, go for the 2008 onwards facelift. If you love those quad headlamps, and that's really where the character of the R230 lies, then you want to go for one of the other two. Now, the earlier models are cheap as chips. You can get them for as little as £4,000. The better ones obviously go up into the teens, into the high teens. And you've got a choice between V6 and V8. Now, I've already described the choice between V6 and V8 in terms of power output. There's quite a difference. However, the V8 does come with its own problems with relation to the active body control and potential problems with that and costs with that. So I would probably discount the first generation. As I said, they are cheap, they can be really cheap and very tempting, but they equally could come with problems. So I would personally go for something 2006, 2007 and early part of 2008 before the second facelift came into play. Now, big question, V6 or V8? Well, ABC issues aside, which are themselves enough of an issue, enough of a reason to go for the V6. Making sure, of course, your V6 doesn't have the ABC optioned. There's only half a second difference between the 0 to 60 times of the V6 and the V8. Obviously the V8 would be a heavier lump, but you could do 0 to 60 is where I've got the timings here somewhere. Yeah, 0 to 60 for the V6 is 6.6 seconds, and for the V8 6.1 seconds. I don't know about you, I very rarely test the 0 to 60 times. It's not a big issue for me. The SL really, unless you're in the AMG spec, which I'm not really covering in these videos, but AMG spec is proper full-on sports car, proper growling, snorting V8s, etc. But in standard spec, the V6 and V8 are pretty comparable from a performance standpoint. So personally, I went with the V6, and I would recommend that that's what you do. So look for an R230 between 2006 and 2008 with the chromed rings around the fog lamps at the front, which means it's the second generation, and the 3.5 litre V6. And obviously try and get as good a one as you can. Make sure it doesn't have active body control. One of the other desirable options is a panoramic roof, like a glass roof. That's quite popular, but really it's a very capable car. There's nothing that this car is bad at. If you want it to be a bit sporty, you've got a sport setting on the gearbox. If you want to be able to have control of when it changes gear, aside from how heavy you plant your foot, then you've got the ability to use a sequential setup. Some of them had paddles on the paddles on the steering wheel. Otherwise, you're just nudging the gear stick. So it's a very, very capable car. And if you want it to, like I said, if you want it to be sporty, you can be sporty. Most of the time, most of the people I know that have these kind of cars just love the way that it wafts. It just cruises along very happily, no dramas, no histrionics, just gets on with the job. So where would you be looking on costs for one of these? So 3.5 litre V6 R230, the first facelift, the second iteration. I would say you're looking somewhere between around £7,000 is the cheapest I've seen. Probably going to be quite high miles, or very, none of them are low spec, let's face it. This was a kind of a flagship sports car for Mercedes, so none of them are very low specification, but it may not have a lot of the different extras. So yeah, 7,000 upwards. I've seen them as high as 20, but that's typically for ones which are very highly optioned and extremely low mileage, and maybe something special about them, some special edition, for example. So yeah, I would say the sweet spot is probably around about £12,000 to £15,000, and that value has actually gone up since I bought this car. As I said, nearly 2 years ago. The values have increased slightly. As with all SLs, there's a huge range of prices on each model. So look carefully. Look at what you can find. In terms of colour choices, as you'll have seen, this is a fantastic colour. It was a Designo colour, Mauritius blue, special option. Rarely do I see any of these around. I keep looking at the classifieds. I've seen one in the last 2 years, other than this one. I've seen one that's kind of bright red. The vast majority that I see are silver, grey, with a few that are black. And you can get sort of maroon colours, and you can get dark blues. But yeah, it's probably 90% of them out there for sale are silver. Mercedes silver arrows, that's the kind of whole shtick of it, I guess. But if you can get one that's a different colour, you're going to stand out a bit more. So in terms of cost of ownership, I guess it depends where you get it serviced. If you can find a decent independent that will do a good job and maybe put a 3-pointed star on your service manual, great stuff. If you're going with Mercedes Mercedes approved, then you're probably going to look at, like, I think mine's due for a B service, which is the bigger one, and I think I'm looking at somewhere around £500 to £600 for that service. And I guess, is that annual? Probably not. That's every couple of years, I guess. I don't do a huge amount of miles. The lower service is less than that, sort of less than 300 potentially. So that's not horrendous by kind of premium car standards. The other things I've had to have done, when I first got it, the air conditioning wasn't working, so I had a new condenser put in. I had a Mercedes-Benz part, a genuine part put in. That cost me, I think, about £800. So that was, but then, the car's gone up more, it's more saleable now as well, and, the value's increased anyway. What else have I had done? Nothing really, it's little bits and pieces. And insurance, other than the fact that, despite this being not particularly a performance car, some insurers think it is, and so they give you a sort of an excess of £500 if you have an accident, any kind of accident in this car. The other thing that this had in it, and it's something else to watch for, is it had a non-genuine Satnav disc. So the genuine Satnav discs are hard to find, let's put it that way, and expensive therefore. Now, some of the best ways you can get them is to search German eBay, because the Germans are good at kind of replacing their Satnav discs and things. So if you can search on eBay in Germany for these discs, you will probably more likely find a genuine one. But the genuine ones bought retail are over £100, 140. I bought one. I managed to get a bit of a deal from the Mercedes dealer locally, like it's old stock, because they don't work in current cars. Current cars don't need them. So he sort of got one. He just wanted a shot of the stock, so I was able to cut a bit of a deal with it. So yeah, that's the only other thing I'd watch for. How often have I used the Satnav? Well, I use the map, but I don't often use the Satnav. I just have the map running just to show what's going on. I used it a couple of times. It's a Satnav, isn't it? I mean, none of them are as good as Google Maps, for example. So it is what it is. So in terms of its interior specification, as I said, the Mercedes SLs were kind of flagship sports cars for Mercedes. So none of them are badly spec'd. But you've got this what they call a command, the command interface or the command system, Satnav, stereo, radio, multi-CD. There's actually, on this one, it's got a Bluetooth phone preparation device. It's a little device tucked under the armrest, which means that I can use my phone through the speakers, not a problem. So it's pretty modern in that sense. I don't think I've really been missing anything by way of gadgets. It's very comfortable. Both seats are heated. You've got good air conditioning now that I've fixed it. So when the roof is down, you've got an option. You can have the wind deflector up, which makes a big difference. You can have the side windows up or down. There's little sort of quarter-light windows at the rear that can be up or down. And there's also a rollover bar. Now, I've never tested this, thankfully. Obviously, if I had done, I probably wouldn't be driving this now. But the idea is that it will pop up, it will clunk up at the point of where you have where it seems like you're going to have a roll or some big issue. You can have it up anyway. You can manually raise it. But we've got a clear day today. I may get the roof down a little bit later. It's so easy to get it up and down. I don't have to stop for long. Okay, just like a convertible now. So that's kind of where I'm at with this SL. I have been thinking of selling it. So we're now just coming. In fact, it's kind of it's early New Year. It's a Ferrari California just gone past. So where am I with this? Yeah, thinking of selling it. I was going to sell it before the winter. I haven't managed to get the service done, and suddenly it's winter, so it's just coming to January, sort of a new year. I don't have anywhere to keep it under cover, so given that it's low mileage and in pretty good nick, I'd probably want to sell it sooner rather than later, whilst it's at the sort of peak of its value. If I keep it too much longer outside, maybe another year, it will degrade. Particularly around our way, there's lots of salt on the road, that kind of thing. So I'm keen to avoid that scenario. So anyway, that's what I think about the R230, and hopefully it's been of interest to you. Hopefully it'll be useful in helping you decide. But it is a cracking car. I do recommend that you buy one. I recommend the V6 over the V8, and I recommend the mid sort of term facelift, the 2006 to 2008 cars, over and above the first iteration or the second facelift. So that's the sweet spot for me, and exactly why I went for this one. Anyway, that's enough of me waffling on about Mercedes SLs. As I said, there is that other video where I talk about the different types of SL, the different variants, and therefore you can have a look at that if you want to think about whether its predecessor is the one you want to go for, the R129, or the one before that, the 107, or whether you're looking later. And obviously we're looking at with kind of interest and a bit of skepticism about the latest generation of Mercedes SL that's been announced and been shown, because it's it's kind of similar, but it's a bit of a departure, and it's back to having no hard roof. So that will be an interesting kind of thing to look at. Anyway, as I said, I'll sign off now. Thanks very much for watching. If you like these videos, please subscribe, please like and comment. I'll try and reply to all the comments, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.